shifting really quickly is a great segue to Dario Amodei's essay, which I don't know if you or I saw it first, but I know we both texted each other pretty quickly, like maybe in the late at night, saying, "Oh wow, this we have to read this, and we probably have to talk about it." So why don't you get us into the conversation? Who is Dario Amodei? Why do we care what he had to say in an essay about the future of AI, and what was the essay kind of about? And then we can get into some of the specifics.
Sure. So you absolutely get the credit for drawing my attention to this first. You texted me late at night and said you have to read this from Dario. And we have sort of been following Dario Amodei for a while in the class that we taught and in understanding the AI landscape. So there are so many people you hear about: Elon Musk, Sam Altman. Depending on how deeply you follow AI, you'll hear all these different names, and they all write and have thoughts about things. Dario Amodei, to me, stands out as somebody who is particularly thoughtful and particularly almost hyper educated around some of the foundational topics that were used to build artificial intelligence on neural networks. So he is the former vice president of research at OpenAI. He and some others left OpenAI to build Anthropic, which is the company that makes Claude, a AI interface that you and I use really frequently, especially for writing. He has a really deep background in physics and in human neuroscience. So he has advanced degrees, terminal degrees from Caltech, Stanford, Princeton, Stanford School of Medicine. He is a very, very intelligent, well-educated expert on physics and the way that the human mind works. And he's also worked in almost every major AI company, tech company in the world, including Baidu, which is the leading tech company in China, Google, OpenAI, and now Anthropic. And he is a trusted source, not only on the development of the technology and how it mimics the human mind, but also on the dangers of AI. And I think that that's, to me, why he stands out among the leaders in tech development. He is very concerned about some of the risks of generative AI on a society-wide scale, which is one of the reasons he formed Anthropic to develop responsible AI. And he's testified before Congress about the dangers of AI. And you'll remember that moment last fall when the board of directors of OpenAI fired Sam Altman briefly before he was reinstated. And many suspect that it was because they were concerned that Sam was moving too quickly and recklessly in developing powerful AI. And they really wanted Dario to come lead OpenAI, and they reached out to him and he declined. But he's a very, very important person in the AI landscape and a very thoughtful and smart person. And so he recently wrote a piece, a really long piece, I think it's like 15,000 words, called Machines of Loving Grace, which is a title that I sort of laughed at when I first read it. It sounds sort of robotic, but it comes from a poem about what if we could live in a world where we coexisted in harmony with machines as humans. And so I think he wrote the piece because he's developed a reputation for being a bit of an AI doomer. And Kevin Roose of the New York Times last year wrote a profile about Anthropic and said it's like the place of AI doomerism, that it's the reverse of what you would think Silicon Valley mindset would be, that they're really concerned about what they're developing. And so he wanted to write a piece that said all the things that he thinks are possible in a positive light because of powerful AI, and make the point and underscore the point that AI has to be responsibly developed and thoughtfully shaped, or we will not be able to achieve these positive ends, which is why he is so concerned about the risks. So just a few points from Amodei's essay. He talks about, we've talked about artificial general intelligence on this show, which is the term most leaders in the tech community use for an ill-defined point at which AI becomes better than most humans at most economically important tasks. He says he prefers the term powerful AI. So throughout the essay, he talks about powerful AI. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Bridget, he defines powerful AI as a point at which AI performs at a level that's above Nobel Prize winners across all disciplines, right? That's how I understood his definition to be.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I found that actually fascinating because above Nobel Prize winners in every discipline is pretty powerful. So
That's
yeah,
pretty
yeah,
smart. That's pretty smart.
yeah,
So above Nobel Prize winner level at all disciplines in a sort of collection of technologies. And he and others believe that we are really going to reach this point sooner than most predicted because of the accelerating advancement of AI, likely in the next few years. And you can debate the timelines. But the point of his essay is he postulates that when we reach this point, we have the capacity of driving 100 years worth of progress on a host of different activities in the span of 5 to 10 years because of the extreme capabilities of these machines. And one thing I want to call out before I go through the focus areas that I thought was interesting as somebody who is really fascinated by human creativity, he makes the point that one of the major limitations at breakthroughs on a variety of fronts in the human landscape is not our intelligence, but our ability to be creative with the intelligence that we have and draw connections across things that might not be so obvious. And one of the reasons he's hopeful that we'll make progress so quickly with artificial intelligence is that it can be more creative and find different connections faster than we can, which I think is interesting, both because I love creativity, but also because one of the myths about AI is that it will never replace our creativity and our ability to be creative, when in fact it might actually be more creative than we are and therefore more capable of unlocking new value.
yeah. I found I found this that particular take so really interesting, and he has great examples of how humans had the ability to make some of the breakthroughs that we've made um, decades before we made them, and it was really just um, not enough time to think of every creative different way of thinking about a particular problem. It just took humans took it 2 decades longer than it would have if an unlimited number of machines were doing the same work. So it makes a lot of logical sense to me, but wasn't a way I had thought about the progress having such an impact that he really convinced me of.
It's funny too. I've been listening to the audiobook of Sapiens by Yuval Harari, walking back and forth with my son to school. And this morning he was talking about the invention of the steam engine and how long, I think it might have been, over a century between recognizing that steam had the capacity to like set off tea kettles and pop lids off of pots, and it was just an annoyance, for humans to realize that that ability for steam to make things move could actually make products move, could make people move. And it made me think of Dario's essay, like an AI might have been able to figure that out the day that it was asked to do it, right? And so it
Yeah.
underscores the point of how much progress we can make because of creativity.
So he addresses 5 different areas where he thinks we could see significant positive change in this, what might be a very short timeline, extremely short timeline. And I know they're all fascinating. First of all, just go read the essay. Don't only listen to us. Go read it. It's worth it. But walk us through a little bit of what those were and where you were drawn to, or what you were mostly focused on.
Yeah. So, given his background in neuroscience and medicine, not surprisingly, he is really interested in AI's applications in science. And so he starts the essay in talking about the potential advancements in biology and physical health and some of the ways that AI can help us conquer and defeat illnesses, diseases, some of the things that we've struggled with for a really long time. He mentions Alzheimer's in particular as a condition that we could potentially defeat in the not so distant future. And coupled with that, he talks about neuroscience and mental health. And he has the most to say about these two topics because of his deep expertise. And he forecasts that we have the capacity possibly to solve many of the conditions that we think are chronic conditions physically, to potentially eradicate things like anxiety and depression, which is mind blowing to me, because we'll have a greater ability to actually understand the physical roots of mental health and tackle them more effectively, all of which will have benefits that redound throughout society, that we could spend weeks thinking about. But he talks about how the main limitations on the advancements there are the physical limitations in our world, things like vaccine trials and the need for time to do certain things, but that the AI itself will not be the limiting factor. It will be other physical and logistical limitations on those things. But he also makes the prediction that we could reach a place of what he calls escape velocity for people who are middle aged, that we might be able to live to be 150 years old. Those of us who are currently middle-aged. I was not that excited about this part of this. I don't want to live to be 150. But I guess if that's your goal, he thinks that could be possible with the advancements that we'll make in AI in the next few years. So I was most grateful to him for this part because it's the part I least understand and the part where he's most expert. He acknowledges in the final three parts that he has less expertise here, but also optimism that we could have advancements in the following three areas: in economic development and the eradication or mitigation of poverty, both in our own country, in the US, and around the world. Fourth, in peace and governance. And we'll dive more deeply into that about the legal system and the things that he says about that. And fifth, the part that is the least well sketched out, that he concedes he doesn't have the most answers for, but the future of work and meaning, the possibility that we could find more meaning and more meaningful work in our future. I think this is the part I worry about the most, frankly, is what the future of work will look like for people. But he gets us started with some optimistic visions for how we could live more meaningful lives. And some of that is just a combination of the first four factors coming together. So he's optimistic in his essay. He wanted to make clear that this is the reason he does the work that he does, because he believes we can unlock these advancements, but that there are so many challenges, mostly human, social, and political, that could prevent us from achieving these goals, which is why he wanted to write the essay so that we can start being more thoughtful as a society. He also talks about the need for international collaboration and trying to have countries that are liberal democracies really drive the shaping of this technology to ensure that illiberal regimes are not the ones who win out in determining how to use AI, which has created some controversy, some feedback that would escalate an arms race or promote international conflict. But it, again, is really all about AI safety and responsibility and aligning the AI, which he believes will be very powerful soon, with human values. And so what we wanted to dig more deeply onto and connect with another leading thinker in our profession, another one that you have drawn my attention to, is his portion on judicial systems. And because we wanted to set the stage well for the second part of the conversation, we are actually going to read from the essay a couple of parts that we think are particularly important for lawyers. So I'll start with the part that stood out to me, Bridget. Dario writes in his section on peace and governance, for example, could AI improve our legal and judicial system by making decisions and processes more impartial? Today, people mostly worry in legal or judicial contexts that AI systems will be a cause of discrimination. And these worries are important and need to be defended against. At the same time, the vitality of democracy depends on harnessing new technologies to improve democratic institutions, not just responding to risks. A truly mature and successful implementation of AI has the potential to reduce bias and be fairer for everyone. And Bridget, I know there was a part of his essay, given your background as an appellate judge, that stood out to you as particularly interesting for lawyers and judges.
Yeah, and I'm going to read it in just one second, but right before that, he correctly, in my view, references the inherently subjective nature of decision making by judges and, arbitrators and, anyone who's making decisions in a legal context, because so often the standard by which the decision has to be made is infused with a really subjective term. Like, he uses cruel and unusual punishment, but I thought of all the times in which reasonableness was part of some standard. And, reasonableness is just inherently squishy. What's reasonable to me might be not that reasonable to you. And smart, well-meaning people with different priors about a particular subject can genuinely have different understandings of what that means. And so it always felt uh, like bias, in the way that we all have bias, just human bias, right? Inherent bias is just part of judicial decision making. But here's the part that I'm going to read from. So bear with me, but I think it's the part that made me quickly send the piece to everybody I work with. But he says, I am not suggesting that we literally replace judges with AI systems, but the combination of impartiality with the ability to understand and process messy, real world situations feels like it should have some serious positive applications to law and justice. At the very least, such systems could work alongside humans as an aid to decision making. Transparency would be important in any such system, and a mature science of AI could conceivably provide it. The training process for such systems could be extensively studied, and advanced interpretability techniques could be used to see inside the final model and assess it for hidden biases in a way that is simply not possible with humans. Such AI tools could also be used to monitor for violations of fundamental rights in a judicial or police context, making constitutions more self-enforcing. And that's, to me, one of the great promises of this technology in the context of the rule of law, right? To the extent that it can bring more rigorous and also more understandable processes to bear, I feel like it really has the potential to grow public confidence in judicial or arbitrator decision making. And so this particular paragraph definitely jumped out at me as worth paying some attention to.
Yeah, and even before we got the chance to work together, I remember years ago we did a podcast where we both talked about, what happens when the technology available to us is used only in the private sector for legal purposes, and the public sector and courts don't get to take advantage. This was pre-Gen AI, we had this conversation. And what would that do to the stability of our democracy if people have less and less confidence? They already have low confidence in the legal system and the judicial system. And so we were both really taken with this and the opportunities it really creates. And we're going to turn in a second to Adam Unikowsky's piece. But we were talking before the podcast about this idea. This is the biggest thing that people raise when I talk about AI, which is AI is biased. It's flawed. We can't trust it. It's not that I disagree with that, but I'm amazed at how much we trust human beings who are deeply flawed and deeply biased to interpret, as you said, these really subjective terms that have real. I mean, even if you just think about the studies about criminal sentences before and after lunch, that are famous. I'm sort of amazed at how unwilling people are to consider a world in which AI could be less biased than human beings are.
I mean, and not only less biased, but the ability to be able to see what it's done and then study it, right, across many decisions is just not access that we could ever have to humans who are making those kinds of decisions. So this to me is very exciting. The tools that it might bring to bear on a pretty important, the most important operating system in our society. So I'm excited about this.
Thank you for tuning in to 2030 Vision, AI and the Future of Law. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Stay informed and inspired as we continue to explore the AI-driven future of the legal profession. We'll see you next time.